So I'm Shinobu Kitayama. I'm the interim director of CJS. Next week, there'll be no lecture, but please join us on Thursday, February the 17th, this month, noon, for Bruce Beard, Associate Professor and Director of East Asian Languages and Culture, and Program Director of Japanese Language and Literature at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. He'll be speaking on Dancing in the Swirl of Imagery, a history of Buto book talk. For this event and the future programs scheduled in the series, please check our CJS events page and website and various social media. Now, attendee webcams and the microphones have to be muted, but we invite you to use the Q&A function during the lecture to submit any questions you have. And the presentation and the speaker will try to address as many questions as possible after the talk. Now, it's my great privilege and honor to introduce Consulate General of Japan in Detroit, Mr. Yusuke SHINDO. Originally from Osaka, he has worked for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs throughout his career. He has played important roles in formulating and executing Japan's foreign policies. He was stationed in Saudi Arabia, Germany, and in Indonesia before starting his current position as Consulate General of Japan in Detroit about a year ago. I hope we can learn what Japan has tried to accomplish through diplomacy in increasingly complex geopolitical conditions that surround Japan today. So anyway, without any further ado, I will give the podium to Mr. SHINDO.
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Professor Kitayama. My name is Yusuke SHINDO. I'm Consul General of Japan here in Detroit. Today, I'd like to talk about my country, Japan, its culture, society, tradition, and also Japan-US relationship. First, I'd like to start with a quiz. Does anyone in the audience, does anyone know Japan's Independence Day, when Japan became independent? I know that US Independence Day, it's July 4th, 1776. And other countries have Independence Day. For example, Mexico, it's September 16th, 1810. And does anyone know when Japan became independent? Actually, there is no Independence Day of Japan. Japan was Japan from the beginning. Japan didn't become independent of any other foreign country. And that is partly because Japan is an island country, totally surrounded by the ocean and separate, excluded from the rest of the world. Never a foreign force, occupied Japan, and so that is why Japan developed very unique culture for many years, for centuries, and since it's separate from the rest, it's very unique. Culture is very unique, and first I'd like to emphasize, Japan is very homogeneous compared to other countries. For example, practically or comparatively, it's one people, Japanese. Everybody looks like the same or similar. And one language, Japanese. Everybody speaks Japanese. And there is one imperial family. the current emperor is 126th emperor, and according to historians, the Japanese imperial house is the oldest continuing monarchical household in the world. So it's very different from other countries. And some basic facts. Japan's population is right now around 125 million people. As you know, US is over 330 million people. So it's much less than the population of the United States. And the size area, it's actually the US is 26 times as large as Japan, but there are many islands in Japan, more than 6,800 islands. And population density, when it comes to population density, Japan's population density is 341 people per square kilometer. US is 34 people. That means Japan is 10 times as dense in population as the United States. So it's that means that Japan is very crowded. In small country, small island, there are many people living in these small islands. I would like to now talk about history of Japan briefly. Before modernization of Japan, samurai is warriors of Japan ruled the country. And it's Tokugawa, it's called the Tokugawa shogunate, ruled the country. And one important policy of the Tokugawa shogunate is sakoku. Sakoku means closed country. That means, as I said, Japan is geographically isolated, but also as a policy, Tokugawa shogunate took isolationist foreign policy. That means there is almost no trade with foreign countries, with some exceptions, but trade with foreign countries was not allowed. And Japanese people were not allowed to go abroad under Tokugawa shogunate. And in 1853, American black ships arrived in Japan. 4 black ships came to Japan and forced the opening of Japan. Japanese people were so surprised to see those 4 black ships. People had never seen such ships, boats. And soon, modernization started. Tokugawa shogunate returned power to the emperor, and the modernization of Japan began. It was in 1868. It's called Meiji Restoration, and it's the end of samurai era. And Japan, at that time, Japan was very underdeveloped. So the slogan was enrich the country, strengthen the army, because at that time, Japan was facing the threat of foreign encroachment. As you may know, European powers were coming to Asia and colonized most parts of Asia. So people thought that, soon European powers will come to take Japan. So that's why Meiji government thought we should enrich the country and strengthen the army. That's the #1 priority. And after the start of the modernization, there was a series of wars. 1894, the Sino-Japanese War, China-Japan War, and 10 years later, the Russo-Japanese War. Japan, to the surprise of everybody, Japan defeated Russia. And then World War I and World War II, as you know. And that was a total destruction of Japan in many ways. And after the war, there was a period of rapid economic growth. Some experts call it Japanese miracle. From 1955 until 1972, average economic growth was over 10% annually. And in 1968, Japan became the world's second biggest economy. And now, as you know, China replaced Japan as world's second biggest economy. Japan right now, Japanese economy is the third largest in the world. Now I'd like to talk about society, Japanese society. First, I want to talk about a famous prince. He's the son of an emperor. He lived in 7th century. His name is Prince Shotoku. All Japanese know Prince Shotoku. And his picture appeared in Japanese banknotes several times. And there are several very important achievements by Prince Shotoku. One is he made a constitution. The United States has a constitution. Japan also has constitution. Most countries have their own constitutions. Japan had a constitution in the 7th century already. And it's called the 17-article constitution because there was 17 articles in this constitution. The Article 1, the very first sentence of this constitution begins, harmony is to be valued. Harmony is very important in our society. And this was written in 7th century, but I think it holds true. It's true that harmony in our society is very important. Part of the reason is that lots of people live in small island country. Population density is so high, so that means you must have good relations with others. You need to be good friends to your neighbors. So that's why in our society, you have to be polite. You have to show respect. You have to be respectful. And you have to be humble. And when you make mistake, you have to apologize. So those are the basic rules in our society. So that's why we Japanese bow a lot to show respect. There's a very famous judo champion. He won world championship and he won also gold medal in the Olympic Games. And when he stood on the podium to receive a medal, gold medal, he bowed deeply. And I thought he was very Japanese. Even if you become a champion of the world, you have to be humble and show respect. So that's our culture. And when you see Japanese sports like sumo or judo, you see players, they bow a lot, always bow to show respect to maybe to the audience, or maybe to the umpire, but most importantly to your opponents, to show respect. So in our society, you always have to think of other people instead of yourselves. You always have to think of the group you belong to instead of yourselves. And you always have to value the harmony of the group you belong to. And as you may know, Japanese people have lived longer than any other people in the world. According to WHO or other statistics, life expectancy in Japan is the highest in the world for many years. So right now, according to WHO statistics, Japan's average life expectancy is 84 years old. And experts mention several factors why Japanese people live longer than other people. One key is food. Some people may be familiar with the Japanese food. You know, we Japanese eat a lot of fish, particularly fresh fish. Many people know sushi. Although we Japanese, I think there is a big misunderstanding here in the United States. We Japanese do not eat sushi every day, only on special occasions. But anyway, we love fish, particularly fresh fish. And some experts say that's one important key to long life expectancy in Japan. And Japan is a technologically developed country. There are many Japanese who won Nobel Prize. And I'd like to talk a little bit about education in Japan. You know, when Meiji government started its modernization, as I said, the slogan was enrich the country, strengthen the army. And there are three important pillars of this of the new government, Meiji government, in 1868, about 150 years ago. One is land tax reforms. Second, military buildup. Third is education. Education was one of the most important pillars of the Meiji government. The Meiji leaders understood that education has a major role to play in nation building and modernization. Japan needed to catch up to the West. And 1872, Meiji government established education system order. That means all students, it was mandatory for every student to go to elementary school. That was 1872. And can you guess how many years it took Japan to build elementary schools in Japan? You know, now it was mandatory for every student to go to elementary school. That means that the government had to build schools all across Japan, even in remote villages. No. Actually, in 3 years, it was almost complete. In 3 years after the establishment of the education system order, it was in 1875, there were more than 24,000 elementary schools in Japan. Right now, in Japan, the number of elementary schools is less than 20,000. That means about 150 years ago, the number of elementary schools was bigger than the number right now. And 1909, according to the statistics, 1909, enrollment was over 98%. That means almost all people were literate. It was 100 years ago already, Japanese people, almost all Japanese people were literate. And by the way, in Japan, in elections, you have to write the names of the candidate you support. And today, so whenever there is a general election, Japanese people who live abroad, they come to the embassy or consulate to vote. So here I have a sample of ballot, and in this space, you have to write the name. But as a diplomat, I lived in several countries. I traveled to many countries, but I've never seen any country. I never know any country in the world, where people have to write the names. In some countries, when you see ballot sheet, it's only pictures, symbol of political parties. That is because people cannot, there are many people who are illiterate. But in Japan, from the beginning, in elections, you have to write names. That is because Japanese people, almost everybody was literate. And there is a famous episode. Shortly after Meiji restoration, there was still internal war going on. And there was one domain that lost the war, and people were poor and hungry. And friendly domain decided to donate rice, 100 sacks of rice. But the domain that received the rice decided not to eat rice, although people were hungry, starving, but they decided not to eat rice that was gifted by a friendly domain, but they decided to sell the rice and build elementary school. This is a very famous episode. And it shows that in Japan, government, people, society, community, there is a consensus on the importance of education. All value education, all committed to education. And in Japan, in elementary school, before studying subjects like mathematics or the language, Japanese language, or whatever subject, the first thing you have to learn is character building, morality, or you have to learn how to be a good student, how to be a good human being. That means you have to learn discipline before learning any subject. In Japan, classes begin with a bow. Classes end with a bow. Everybody bows in Japan, in schools. And in schools, students themselves, they have to clean their classrooms. After the class, they themselves have to clean their classrooms. So that means that you just cannot throw away any trash because you yourself have to clean the classroom. That's how they learn, how to keep the room clean. And also, very often, students themselves, they serve lunch to other students. probably some people know that in World Cup soccer, Japanese supporters, they stay at the stadium after the game and they clean the stadium. Not only they pick up their own trash, but they try to pick up all trash in the stadium. That is, I as a Japanese, I think I understand. We are very much used to cleaning everywhere. And I'd like to now talk a little bit about economy or economic development. As I said earlier, from 1955 until 1972, it was called the period of rapid economic growth. Average economic growth rate was over 10% annually. And the factors behind rapid economic growth was national characters of Japan. And what are the characters? For example, one is group culture. That means everybody helps each other, supports each other. We do everything as a team. The teamwork is very important. And people are very hardworking. And education standard was high. And people are honest, sincere, and very patient. So those national characters of Japan produced a lot of quality workforce. Such factors are behind rapid economic growth. And how we learn this group culture. Some experts say, some scholars say that Japanese people eat rice every day. And when the rice planting season comes, everybody has to help each other. So it's a kind of joint work. So that's why, group culture is nurtured in Japanese society. That's one explanation. And in Japan, in elementary school, particularly in elementary schools, there is an athlete meet, sports day. And all students, they practice before this day. And so it's, you learn how to do certain things as a group. And very often in schools, there is a morning meeting. Everybody has to stand in line. In schools, people learn how to behave as a group. And in Japan, a company is like a big family. So they take care each other. And traditionally, now it's changing, but traditionally, it's lifetime employment. That means that once you join a company, you continue to work for the same company until retirement. That's very typical in Japan. And that means that companies are willing to invest in people. Companies are willing to train their employees. And let's say senior engineers, they are willing to teach junior workers skills, experience, expertise, everything. So, partly because we have lifetime employment, in-house training system inside a company, that is very common. and people feel secure. Unless you want to leave, usually you can stay with the same company. So that's why many people feel that a company is like a family. And, now I'd like to talk about culture of Japan. First, traditional culture. There are several very interesting, traditional cultures in Japan. For example, probably many of you know tea ceremony in Japan. We call sado or chado. It's a ceremonial preparation and presentation of matcha, powdered green tea. Also, we have ikebana, that means arranging flowers. And there is a shodo. Shodo, Japanese calligraphy. It's a form of calligraphy or artistic writing of the Japanese language. And we have several traditional sports. One is kendo. Kendo means the way of the sword. It's sword fighting using bamboo swords. And also there is judo. Probably you know judo because it's an Olympic sport. And there is karate. Karate literally means empty hand. It's originally developed in Okinawa, a southern island in Japan. And there is aikido, the way of unifying life energy. Aikido is performed by blending with the motion of the attacker and redirecting the force of the attack rather than opposing it head-on. And also there is sumo. Probably sumo wrestlers. They're so big. And wrestler rikishi, we call it rikishi, loses a match when any part of his body other than the bottom of his feet touches the dohyo. Dohyo means ring of combat, or when he is pushed or thrown outside of the dohyo. So the sumo is still one of the most, maybe the most popular sport in Japan. And we also have pop culture. Probably you know manga and anime. I know that there are many fans of Japanese manga anime here in the United States. And cosplay. I was surprised to hear that there is a cosplay event here in Detroit every year. It's called the YumaCon. I'm very happy that so many young people are interested in cosplay. And also J-pop music and some unique fashion, Harajuku fashion. And now I'd like to talk about US-Japan relationship. Probably you know allies of the United States. For example, European countries like UK, Germany, France, Italy, and Canada. They are allies of the United States. NATO members. NATO is an alliance organization. That means all NATO members are allies of the United States. Plus, people say Republic of Korea, Israel, Australia, those countries are the allies of the United States. But for Japan, allies of Japan, we have only one ally, only the United States. The United States is the only country in the world that legally promised to defend Japan when Japan is attacked. So for us, that's the only country in the world. So that shows that how important the United States is when it comes to our security. And right now, the security situation in the East Asia, as many of you know, it's very, very difficult. According to media reports, North Korea launched a missile on January 30th. It was North Korea's 7th round of missile launches this year. That's one example. So since the security situation is very difficult, our relationship between Japan and the United States, it's getting closer. And when you look back at history, I mentioned many times the Meiji Restoration. It happened mainly because American black ships came to Japan and forced the opening of Japan. In a way, thanks to the US sending black ships, Japan was able to start modernization. And as I mentioned earlier, Japanese people were so surprised to see 4 black ships. People had never seen such black ships. It was not made of wood. And many guns were pointing at at Japan. So people were so scared, surprised. And so American black ships came 1853. And about 50 years later, 1904, as I mentioned, there was Russia-Japanese war. And somehow Japan defeated Russia, but the crucial battle was, it's called Battle of Tsushima, or Naval Battle of the Sea of Japan. So Russia sent a big fleet from Russia to East Asia, and Japanese naval force completely destroyed the Russian fleet. In 50 years, so 50 years ago, Japanese people had never seen, ships made of steel. But 50 years later, because of the rapid modernization, Japanese naval force defeated the one of the biggest, most powerful naval force in the world. So it's a big change after the start of the modernization. And also after the Second World War II, under US occupation, there were several important reforms. For example, before the war, military ruled Japan. But after the war, demilitarization and democratization started. And we adopted new constitution. Emperor became the symbol of Japan. Militarism became pacifism, and so on. So Japan completely changed. That is also because of the US policy. Economically, after the war, Japan broke up the zaibatsu. Zaibatsu is it's industrial financial business conglomerate. And that means, economically, Japan, became more free. And also there was transfer of ownership of agricultural land from landlords to tenant farmers. All those important reforms were carried out under the US occupation. So people are so grateful to such reforms. under the guidance of the United States. So when you see polls, everybody, it's been consistent. Japanese people love the United States. As I said, it's not just security-wise, it's extremely important. US is important, but in many ways, when you see the history, we owe a lot, to the United States. And after the war, there was a peace treaty. It was signed in San Francisco. It's 1951, and at the same time, security treaty between the United States and Japan was signed on the same day. And in 1960, Treaty of Mutual Cooperation and Security between the US and Japan was signed. And April 16, last year, US President Biden received the first head of state. Because of the COVID, it was not easy to receive foreign guests. But April 16, it was the first time US President received foreign guest, head of state. That was Japanese Prime Minister Suga. And we have new Prime Minister right now, Fumio Kishida, new Prime Minister. He became Prime Minister October 4th last year. And the very next day, there was a telephone talk between Prime Minister Kishida and US President Biden. So for us, it's very important. It shows that how important US is. And there was a Quad Leaders Summit September last year. And also this year, January 6th and 7th, US-Japan Security Consultative Committee. It's called 2+2. Japanese Foreign Minister and Defense Minister, they had meeting with the Secretary of State Blinken and Secretary of Defense Austin. And also there was virtual meeting between Japanese Prime Minister Kishida and US President Biden, January 21st this year. So these events show that how close our relationship is. And economic field, we signed, US and Japan signed Japan-US trade agreement and Japan-US digital trade agreement in October, October 2019. For Japan, when you see Japanese export, US is the biggest destination. Japan exports to the US more than any other country. And for Japan's import, US is the second biggest after China. And when you see US export, Japan is the fourth biggest. US import, Japan fourth. That means US imports after China, Mexico, Canada, US imports from Japan. And here in Michigan, people try to attract investment. When you see statistics, Japan is the largest foreign investor in the United States. Japanese foreign investment in the United States, it was 679 billion in 2020. That's number one. And 885,000 Americans are employed by US-based Japanese companies in 2017. And export from the US by US-based Japanese businesses in 2017, it was 95 billion, or 6.2% of total US exports. And R&D, capital expenditures by Japanese companies in the US In 2017, it was 8.8 billion US dollars. So in conclusion, investment of Japanese companies in the US economy, combined with its substantial contributions to US exports and accelerating R&D capital expenditures, are all critical considerations in increasing America's manufacturing capacity and industrial competitiveness, resulting in a dynamic US-Japan economic relationship. Yes, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to take questions.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a few questions. So first question is from Alison Alexei. Let me read it out. Thank you for your presentation and your work on behalf of US-Japan relations. As you know, since COVID-19, many of our students have been unable to visit Japan for language learning or internship. Do you have any idea about when it might be possible for non-citizen students to enter Japan again? I'm sorry to say that the current immigration policies will be hurting Japan and Japanese studies in the long term as more students are pushed away from Japan.
Yes, I'm very, very aware of the difficulties for foreign students who want to come to Japan, but who are not able to come to Japan because of the very strict immigration policy, or because of the COVID situation. And not only I personally, but Japanese government is very much aware of this issue, and it's a balance between health concerns and also opening up the country. So it's not easy, and I really cannot predict when, because of the uncertainty of the COVID situation. But I just want to emphasize that yes, we are very much aware of this difficulty or of this issue and how serious or how important this matter is. Yeah, but thank you for the question.
Okay, here's a question from Professor Sugimori from Kalamazoo College. In the year 2000, by the Japanese Language Council, made a decision about how the order of Japanese personal names should be rendered in English. I think this is a rare case of international language management about to what extent one country can influence language in use in other countries. That is, in Japanese, family name comes first, and given name second. But this Japanese National Language Council made the decision that other countries need to follow this Japanese convention. So imposing Japanese domestic decision on international other countries. So this seems like a rare situation. Some questions occurred to me. So Professor Sugimori is saying, how the language used in treaties is prepared. When we need translation into other languages, who translate Japanese into English? Has Japan made a correction if they found an incorrect word order of personal names in documents? For example, Joe Biden as opposed to Biden Joe. So that's the question. That's a very interesting question to me. What's the current convention? I'm curious.
Yes. Yes, there was a policy change, but it's for Japanese. That means when I write my name, before we followed English or Western style. That means you put your given name first, then family name. So in my case, my given name, first name is Yusuke, but my family name is Shindo. But so I always put Yusuke Shindo, Yusuke Shindo. But as Japanese know, in Japan, it's the opposite. You write family names first. In Japan, we do that. But so for many years, in a way, we adopted Western style when you write your name in English. And so that's why there was policy change. In a way, we should follow our own tradition. You put your family name first, then given name. And if I'm not mistaken, I think, for example, other countries like China does the same. They put their family names first. Maybe Korea the same. So it depends on the country, what the practice they follow. So that's why we saw other examples of other countries, and we decided to change. So that means officially, when I write my name, or when any Japanese in let's say in English documents, we put family names first, but we are not asking, requesting foreigners, others to do the same. So yes, they are free to write their own names in their own way, but Japanese, we decided, yes, we ourselves, let's do it in our own way. Let's put family name first and given name last. And I think there was another question, who translates the treaty? And but usually, there is a text, English, French, or whatever language, and also, of course, Japanese text. You have to submit to the parliament, diet. And of course, government officials, they translate. And yes, foreign ministry officials, they do the translation. I think I think that was the question. I think I answered it. But is there any other question I have to, answer?
Okay, so thank you very much. Now, next question. Just a moment. Let me. The question. Oh yeah, here. So you talked a lot of things about Japan that is very glorious and Japan's success stories. Now, I think many people here in this room are aware of some issues, problems, conflict, and whole other issues which are very important in Japan. Just take a few examples just that pops up in my mind. Ijime, bullying has been such a big issue, and suicide rate is one of the highest in the world. And Shoshika, that is declining birth rate, is such a huge issue. So I'm combining my own questions to this question. So can we hear a little bit about some of these seemingly negative sides or impinging problems facing Japan has faced?
Yes, I would say you also mentioned, the population is getting old. This is a very serious problem. That means it's not just population is decreasing. Every year, the Japanese population is shrinking. Every year, the number of babies who are born, it's smaller than the number of people who passed away. And so population is decreasing and also getting older. The average age, it's older. So it's a very serious social challenge. That means how to cope with this, aging society. That is one very important issue Japan is facing. And so that is why, 2 or 3 years ago, Japan made a big decision and opened up its labor market. We decided to accept skilled workers from around the world. That was a very big change in our society. That's because, many companies, they face labor shortage issue. So I would say that's one very important issue. And also, Professor Kitayama mentioned ijime. I would like to say yes. Education it's always a very important issue. Everybody is concerned or interested in education issues, and yes, yeah. Those things I can come up with immediately on top of my head, as issues Japan is facing right now.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. A few questions coming from Yuki Shiraito. So thank you very much for your talk. Regarding your remarks on Independence Day, I'm curious if the Allied occupation is not military occupation according to the Japanese government interpretation. The cabinet designated April 28th as a de facto Independence Day to commemorate Treaty of Peace with Japan, as far as I remember. So I hope the question makes sense to you.
The person who presented this question seems very knowledgeable about Japan. Maybe this person knows many things I don't know. I was saying that Independence Day, most countries, they have Independence Day, and that's a national holiday. That's the most important day for that country. And embassies and consulates, they celebrate every year. They have Independence Day reception, but not Japan. Japan, there are many national holidays, and probably the number of national holidays in Japan, it's bigger than most other countries in the world. There are so many national holidays, but there is no Independence Day. And the day this person mentioned, I really don't know whether there's any event. At least as far as I know, I didn't know anything is going on that day. So that is what I meant by Independence Day. All people, they celebrate their own Independence Day. Most countries have such Independence Day, but we don't. And by the way, in diplomacy, then what should we do as National Day reception? So all embassies, almost all embassies, they celebrate their National Day. We have Emperor's birthday reception. I think, for example, the UK is pretty much the same. Queen's birthday reception. That is what I meant. That by we don't have Independence Day.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Now, next question is about the homogeneity of Japanese as a nation. Now, I think in this group, there are lots of people who are interested in diversity. And so, well, from that point of view, there are Zainichi people, Chinese. I'm from Yaizu, Shizuoka. And there are lots of folks from Brazil to work in maguro ship, tuna fishing boat. So, and also in the United States right now, there's interest and there's a desire to do something about diversity has been very, very strong, as you might know, from the Black Lives Matter movement. So I think that's the context of this question. So you praised the homogeneity of Japanese nation and emphasized on harmony. And I understand the reason why you did so, because in 1980s, there are these characteristics were considered positively as part of the causes of rapid economic growth. However, more recent social science studies have revealed that the homogeneity is a myth. And this view of national homogeneity and harmony may sound close to this, some right-wing view in the United States, in the sense that it advocates the abuse of minority rights. So he's wondering, he says, I'm wondering if the Japanese government would like to promote the view that Japanese society is kind of exclusive and oppressive of minority groups, and that it's not clear if it's an admirable feature, he's wondering if Japanese society might be moving forward to even slowly into more diverse and more inclusive society.
Yes, I'm not 100% sure I understood the question, but first I mentioned homogeneity. Comparatively, Japan is a homogeneous society. When I said it, I was mindful that there are, of course, some other groups in Japan. So I think I emphasized or mentioned comparatively or relatively homogeneous. But anyway, it was never my intention. I don't think I said it. We are promoting homogeneous society or homogeneity. But I was explaining the fact that Japanese society is relatively homogeneous compared to other countries. Just before I came here, to Detroit, I was in Pakistan. I also lived in Switzerland before Pakistan, and also before Switzerland, I was in Indonesia, and I was in Los Angeles before Indonesia. And let's say Pakistan, there are several ethnic groups. There are multiple languages. Their cultures are so different. And Indonesia, the same. There are so many different languages, so many cultures, but it's one nation. And as you know, Switzerland also has multiple languages. But compared to such countries, Japan is, compared to other countries, Japan is more homogeneous. That was what I wanted to explain. So I never meant Japan is promoting something or homogeneity is good or bad. And by the way, when I lived in or other countries like Pakistan or the United States or Indonesia, I always admire this diversity. And I always believe that that's the strength of those countries. It's not a matter which is good or which is bad. It's simply that there are many different countries. And I think one question is, what will the Japanese society become? Something like that, more diversified or something like that. You know, or last year, was it? Yeah, last year, as you may know, Japan hosted Olympic Games, and 2 years ago, or almost 3 years ago, Japan hosted the World Cup Rugby, and I was so impressed. When you see Japanese national teams, there are so many players, athletes, you know, who are not, who don't look a typical Japanese. And, you know, Olympic Games decades ago, yeah, in the 70s or 80s, I remember, you know, Japanese national teams, they all look Japanese. Now it's changing, you know, so it shows that the society is very much changing. And I think that's a very, in a way, very good development. Everything is getting so international, so globalized. And, you know, or in our own way, Japanese society is adjusting. So yes, I would predict that yes, the Japanese society would be more diversified. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you. Now, one more question. He says, here's a question. As a political scientist, I can tell that the consensus among scholars is that Japanese ballot system that asks voters to write a candidate's name is worse than the ballot system in which voters simply choose from a list of candidates. Is the Japanese government claiming that Japan can use the writing ballot system because of a high literacy rate, but other countries cannot because of illiteracy? I think he's asking, his point is that science research is showing that, you know, just choosing one name out of the list of names is easier and probably that's more accurate. What's the point of using the system where you have to write a name?
Yes, you know, my intention, you know, when I mentioned ballot or election, I just wanted to explain a literacy rate. And I didn't mean to discuss election system or ballot. And I really don't know the answer, you know, if the question is why Japanese, they, you know, require people to write names, and is it better than, you know, just to check the names that are already printed? I really don't know. But again, I lived in many countries, and I realized the Japanese election system is so unique, so different. As I said, in one country, you know, I served, it's just a huge sheet. There are so many, you know, pictures, just elephants or tigers or whatever. And people just, you know, mark the picture you like. Each picture symbolizes the political party. And, you know, I sometimes had discussion with the, you know, people. Then when I explained Japanese, you know, ballot or Japanese election system, you know, they were so surprised. And they say that's impossible for their country because people cannot write, many people cannot write. So today I wanted to explain about Japan. This you know, and Japanese people compared to other countries, some other countries, Yes, literacy rate is almost 100%. That is very different, and I thought it was unique. That's why, and as an example, I mentioned, ballot. So I really don't know the answer, the merit of this, the way people vote or ballot, whether it's good to write names or just check the names that are already printed. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, I think that there's one question related to aging population, which you mentioned a little bit earlier. So Sydney Foster asked the following. Thank you for the presentation. In regards to the declining and aging population, is immigration something that Japanese government is considering to avert the negative implications of these trends like some other nations are doing? Additionally, interracial relationships, something that would be accepted in Japan?
I'm sorry, immigration, the question is, this immigration is causing problems in Japan?
No. I think what the person is asking is that, okay, so population is declining, people are aging very, very quickly. So do you think whether Japanese government might be considering immigration as something that can avert this problem, that can address this issue?
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
I mentioned briefly in this question and answer session about, I think 3 years ago, Japan made a big decision, big change. We decided to accept skilled workers. We practically opened up this, labor market to foreign workers. And that is because, as I said, the population is shrinking and it's getting old. And by the way, this change of immigration policy, the most serious, there are sectors mentioned where Japan would accept skilled workers. One sector that has serious issue is care workers. And so there are many old people and we need, care workers. And that's, we desperately need, such workers. And other sectors, for example, agriculture, construction, and so on. So we need workers, and in a way, that's the change of our immigration legislation. That shows that we are, of course, we had to address this issue, and we are in the process of addressing the issue, including changing our immigration policy.
Oh,
And,
thank you.
yeah.
Yes.
There was another question. Is it interracial relationship?
Yes, interracial marriage. Japanese, well, either government or, well, I'm sure government is accepting it. The question is more like it's going to be accepted in Japanese society.
Yeah, there is no law or regulation that bars that prohibit interracial marriage. So before the law, everyone is equal. So there's nothing to stop it.
Thank you. Could you talk about the relation between Japan and Detroit specifically? Why was Detroit chosen as a location for the consulate? Are there any connections to automobile industry and tensions between American and Japanese car companies?
Yes, in general, generally speaking, when you establish a consulate, there are some criteria. For example, how many Japanese live in that area, or how many Japanese companies, operating in that area, and so on. Because establishing a consulate means that there is the requirement of consular service. And yes, I'm very happy that in Michigan, so my office is in charge of Michigan and Ohio. And Michigan, there are many Japanese people, and also Ohio, 15,000 Japanese people live in Michigan, and around 500 Japanese companies operating. It's a big number. And yes, it's true that when I meet Japanese business people here, most of them, many of them belong to, one way or another, they belong to automotive related, sector. So partly because Detroit is kind of a hub of auto industry. There are so many Japanese coming, which are involved in the auto sector, and so many Japanese means that there is work to do, consular work to do. And yes, many years ago, there was kind of trade friction, and one of the consulate's mission is to promote friendship between Japan and the United States in every field, including economic and also culture and so on. So I do hope that the consulate here, it's one of the missions that, and also we will continue to promote stronger, better economic relations between Michigan and Japan. And luckily, I'm so happy that people here, people in Michigan, they welcome almost all of them I meet. They welcome Japanese and Japanese investment, Japanese businesses. So I do hope that this good, positive relationship will continue and will develop.
Yes, thank you so much. One more question. Christine Mahon, I hope there are opportunities for global classrooms. I'm at another university where we have 3-week sessions using Zoom, where students in Philadelphia work with students at international university. So she's encouraging University of Michigan to seek out those opportunities during COVID and in the future. So I think her broader question is whether and to what extent Japanese government or you personally may promote such a great opportunity for the future for global classrooms.
Oh yes, that's a good suggestion. Consulate, Japanese consulate has its own jurisdiction, the area you are in charge of. So we tend to deal with the universities here in our area and deal with the people. But yes, these days it's getting particularly using online, it's global. So maybe it's a good idea to do something globally. But if I'm not mistaken, this person is in Philadelphia. And then I think our consulate in New York is in charge of Philadelphia. And by the way, I lived in Philadelphia for 2 years. So sometime in the future, I hope I will have a chance to come back to Philadelphia, but not officially because it's not my territory. But anyway, thank you for the question.
Okay, so time is running up, but there's one interesting issue which people might appreciate if you could address, which is that right now, I think China or Korea in those countries, there are quite a few people who still keep negative feelings because of what happened during the World War II. Some of us may be curious what Japanese government might try to address this international issue within East Asia.
I don't have the perfect answer, but our relation with our neighboring countries, such as China, Korea, it's very important. And yes, we do have issues. We are constantly addressing such issues. Yes, I do hope that we have good relations with all the countries, particularly our neighbors. Right now I don't have any good answer or suggestion, but we always hope that we are going to have good relations with those neighboring countries.
Okay, thank you very much. I think this was a great opportunity for many of us to learn what you know about Japan and what your concerns might be and what your future visions are. So on behalf of the audience, I want to thank you very much for your time and for your presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it, and thank you for listening, for joining. Thank you.